Welcome back. I'm your host, Kelle Sparta, transformational shaman and spiritual coach. I'm here with my friend and fellow spiritual coach, Joshua Radewan, who specializes in working with people in the paranormal world. And so today we are going to talk about mastering timeline jumping and what the foundation is of the Mandela effect. And are you living in the wrong reality? So I love this on the heels of the last episode that you and I did, Josh, around creating your own reality, because it is in alignment with that. And we're going to debunk some conspiracy theories today. We're going to talk about how the timeline stuff works, and we're going to talk about what the Mandela effect is and how that is playing out, right? So let's talk about timelines for a minute. Okay. Every time you make a decision in your life, you shift to a new timeline. Okay, that's just the nature of the beast. It is you are choosing the timeline. You create a timeline for one thing. Let's start with that. Every decision point creates a split in the timeline because you could have chosen left or right. You could have chosen up or down. You could have chosen yes or no. There's each of the choices, and sometimes there are multiple choices that you could have made. You could have made 50 different choices, and now every single choice you could have made created a new timeline. And everything that goes down that timeline goes from that choice point, right? If you're a Star Trek fan, which I am, there's an episode in Voyager where they really talk about this a lot. It's the year from hell, I think is what they called it. And it might actually be a 2 episode combo, but it's the guy is going back to different points in time and changing decisions to try and save his wife. And he keeps messing with the timeline, and it's just destroying a lot of things, right? And this is the reality scenario. And sometimes there are hard points that happen in the timelines, that things that are going to happen no matter what, right? Because they're okay, how do I talk about this? So, language, here we go. If you imagine that everyone in the world is making decisions, and all of those decisions are creating realities, and there are intersectional points between the decisions that people make. And the collective reality is created by all of the people creating the collective reality. People, animals, the world itself, everything that is and isn't. It's creating the collective reality. And so when the collective is headed in a particular direction, it will create hard points in the collective choice point that cannot be changed. And that's because too many energies or too many choices are leading in this particular direction, and so on and so forth, right? And so that's one of the pieces to take into account, is that when you're changing your choice points, you are changing your reality, but you're also impacting the reality of the people around you. And then they will make choices based on that are reflect in the people around them, and so on and so on. Okay. And there is a collective energy flow of where the energy for the collective reality is heading in as well. Okay. So it's very complicated. Okay. So let's just start with it's very fucking complicated. Okay. Now, there are times that you will choose a timeline jump. So a friend, I can't remember who it was, but a friend of mine years ago told me a story that she was sitting in a workshop with someone who talks about choosing the reality that you want to live in. And he literally fell off the stage and had a compound fracture in his leg, which he pulled and set himself. And then he proceeded to sit on the stage and talk about how you choose a reality in which, you want to live. And he was in the process of doing that, choosing a reality in which he did not break his leg. And within, I can't remember, I think it was like 20 minutes or half an hour of the talk, he pulled his pant leg up and his leg was totally healed. And so there was this moment of holy crap, right? But that is a way in which you can use it to do that. You could choose to be in another reality in which you do not have the thing that you have, right? So that sort of thing. But keep in mind that if this is something that you have and it was meant to bring you a lesson, you will lose that lesson or you will manifest it in another way. And I often talk to people about, yes, you could choose another timeline, but are you sure it's going to be better? Right? because what we think is better today, and we talk about this all the time, right? When you're having an evolutionary experience, everything in your life, good, bad, indifferent, is there for a reason. So if, for instance, if I didn't get flooded out of my apartment, we were talking about that less in the last episode. If I didn't get flooded out of my apartment, we wouldn't have bought the house. If we didn't buy the house, then we wouldn't have ended up in Panama, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes what we think of as bad things are not actually as bad as we think they are. They're actually necessary things. And so this is why it's important to get out of judging things, right? But it is an option, and you are a sovereign being, and you can choose as you will, right? And I can hear the how do I do it? How do you do anything in magic? You intend to do it. That's how you do it, right? And it's about holding the energy of that and being present with it, not as a I want this, but this is. Because what you focus on expands. If you say, I want this, you will get more of wanting it. If you focus on having it, then you will get more of having it, or not having it, as the case may be, depending upon what you're looking at. But again, the universe doesn't hear negatives. So this is changing timelines is another example of manifesting, right? You can choose a different timeline in which you have different things, in which you experience different things. And so it's a more complex process because you have to undo your disbelief that it can happen. And that's the challenge, right? I always say that the most stubborn people make the best shamans because they will go through to the very, very end of everything because I am going to get there come hell or high water. Nothing will stop me. But we also are the most difficult because we're like, we've got a grip on reality that is, no, this is what reality is. I am very solidly connected to it. And that's the problem. In order to be able to modify your timeline in this way, you have to release your grip on reality in a really significant way. And I have been working on this particular ability for 25 years, and I'm still mediocre at it. Because I'm really attached to reality, right? And even though I regularly change things and I regularly understand, I can modify things, whatever, when it comes to other people's reality, I'm fine. I can manifest and manipulate and move things around in ways that are just like entirely magical, and it does not faze me at all. But my own reality, I'm still working on. We need to know where we are, right? This is an understanding. So I can do for other people many more things than I can do for myself, which is horrifying, but true. So these are the things that you have to pay attention to for timeline shifting. Now, what is a timeline shift and how does it show up in your life? So I have actually personally had somebody call me and say, I woke up and everyone was different. My town is mostly the same, but there are buildings that are not there that should be, and there are some shops in places where they shouldn't be, and they've moved, and generally my town is mostly the same, but it's not. And all of my family are completely different personalities, and I'm freaking out. That's a massive timeline shift. Okay. That is, you're in a new timeline. Okay. When you are in a new timeline, there are going to be things that are off. And there are massive shifts that have happened. And I think what's happening right now is a lot of timelines are converging. And it's because we had a split way in the back, and now things are collapsing back again. And so we're seeing people, if you go and you research, the Mandela effect is named after Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela, in one timeline, died in 1994 or 91. I can't remember. And then in another timeline, survived and became president of South Africa. And I think he's still living today, sort of thing. I think that's this timeline. I haven't researched whether he's alive or dead right now, but that's an example, right? So there are a lot of examples of this. In a lot of cases, there's a lot of brands are showing up. So like people think the Fruit of the Loom had a cornucopia around the fruit, but in this timeline, it doesn't. Some people said that Jif peanut butter was Jiffy, and that's my reality. I remember that. I remember the cornucopia, but it's actually Jif. And in this reality, and in my reality, New Zealand was on top of Australia. When I grew up, New Zealand was on top of Australia. And it is not now. It is to the southeast of Australia. It is closer to the Arctic than Australia is. And I'm like, what? That is not how I remember that. And so there are a lot of people just like me who were like, what? That's not true. And so you will actually find, and things like Sinbad's movie Shazam, that never happened in this timeline. It didn't exist. But you can find artifacts of these things on the internet. And so you can find things in different parts of different videos and where they're shown on the internet. And so I think what happened is we had a collapse of multiple timelines. And so if you research the Mandela effect, you're going to find hundreds of these things and they're going to mess with your brain. So just know that before you go down the rabbit hole. Okay. And we talked about creating reality in the last episode. We're going to talk about creating reality in this episode as well around, am I living in the right timeline? And so there's the ability to manipulate your physical reality as a function of the ability to step into the dimension in which the timeline that you are choosing is existing. And it is a dimensional shift because you create new timelines and timelines in the fourth dimension and, all of that, right? But there's a lot of people who are like, oh, CERN created this. No, CERN did not create this. If you look at the physics, say there's this much energy in what they're doing in the Hadron Super Collider, right? And the Large Hadron Super Collider. There's not enough energy to create a timeline shift at CERN. Okay, so let's just start with that. This is victim energy. We do not want to be landing in victim energy. We want to stay out of that bullshit, right? So let's not go into the conspiracy theories of, oh, they're doing this to us, blah, 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 right now. The key is to recognize that this is a natural state of being. Okay, timelines open and timelines close, and it is a function of the collective energy and collective intention and in collective, think of it like a river of energy flowing in a specific direction. And when the river lines up in certain ways, the timelines split. And when the river lines up in other ways, the timelines collapse. And that's just the nature of things. Because we did not have the internet before now, we didn't have the way to track these things and people would not talk about them. And so it's like Richmond. I keep telling people it's the most haunted place I've ever been in the US. And everybody has a ghost story and nobody tells each other. Okay. This shit is the same way because there was no proof to support your assertion. Nobody would open their freaking mouths. Okay. And you would just say, I just misremembered, and you move on with your day. But because we now have the internet, we now have ways for other people to go, yeah, I remember that too. Now we believe ourselves. And so we're aware of it at a deeper level. But it is not because of technology. This is something that has happened forever, right? And it's just a nature of things. Josh, did you want to add anything? I've been monologuing this whole time.
I mean, no, it's great. The only thing is, there's a couple fantastic movies I think I wanted to add here is Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh,
If you
yeah.
haven't seen that, is fantastic look into different timelines and what you were talking about, how every decision splits off into another thing. And it's funny because not that I'm resonating with it at this point, but I resonated with her story in the sense that I made all of the poor decisions and I felt like I was her at the laundromat until I came to that recognition of, oh, like I am me. There is a more to this and there's more to me, and stepping into that conscious process of becoming a creator. The other one is The One by Jet with Jet Li in it, which is a really good movie too. It's an action movie, but it also discusses it or talks about it, at least from a how it can work. Those two movies are great. I want to bring up something because I've wondered this. You've done energy work on me, obviously, at this point, because holy shit, once again, you're really good. And it's because I can meet you on that vibration, right? I can meet
Right.
you at that frequency that this is what you can do because I've witnessed it now, right? Like I
Right.
have trust in your abilities, which is a big part of being able to manipulate energy. When you can trust that somebody has that ability, they can help you with things if you allow your heart to open to it, right? That's a big part of that process. So that being said, one of the things I wanted to talk about is shifting realities. Before I ever stepped on any shamanic path, I was timeline jumping all the time because of drug use. Like my The amount of shifts I went now that I can go back and look at everything that's happened, it's crazy. And this is what I think a lot of addicts go through and they don't really know, especially when you're using heavy doses of stimulants, right? There's something about stimulant use that does something to the wiring upstairs that is very interesting in the doorways and possibilities that it opens, right? This is why they banned it for housewife use back in the 50s and 60s because, all the things that they were experiencing. One of the things that happened was we found an interdimensional tear in my field, right? So I was, not only was I going different places unknowingly, things were coming into my reality, right? And I know that this is a bigger thing and a little bit different than what we're talking about, but I've always wondered how that functions on an operational level. So when I would use, there were certain times I would use and I would shift reality, right? I would go to a reality where all of my fears were coming into. This was a very hard shamanic lesson for me. And really at the tail end of my addiction, were the shamanic lessons coming through in this and the reality creation piece. Like I would use, and then like towards the fourth or fifth day of being awake, being on this chemically induced vision quest, I realized that everything I was thinking about would happen in my reality and crazy shit in front of me. And it was wild. So I don't really know how I'd formulate that into a question, but I don't know what you can mine from all of that, which I just stated.
Well, we'll start with if you're up for 4 or 5 days straight, you are going to hallucinate. So we'll start with that. And you may have had some hallucinations, but the fact is that when we get out of our own way, we are inherently grossly popular, grossly powerful, right? Like insanely powerful. There's nothing that we can't create. And the other thing that happens if you're up for that long, and let me be really clear, we are not recommending stimulant use.
No.
We are not recommending that you stay up for 4 or 5 days straight. These are really unhealthy things, and there are better ways to get there. So please do not take this as this is a good idea. I think it's a really bad idea. Okay.
It's the worst idea, absolutely worst idea possible. This is where I screwed my energy field up and it took years to repair. Let me just put that disclaimer out there. Going through that and going that deep into the fear trapped trauma in my body because of these is where a lot of the inner work that I had to do to unravel the shit that I put myself through. So that is the disclaimer I want to put out there. I absolutely agree with what Kelle is saying here. Do not stimulate this on your own accord. There are much easier ways to get there. Intention is good. I recommend the old-fashioned, slow psychological approach myself.
Yes. So there's a reason I don't do plant medicine journeys, and there's a reason I don't use stimulants and things like that. It's because it's a shortcut. And don't get me wrong, plant medicine has its place, but I think it's being used currently in a way that is entirely unhealthy for the US. I think a lot of people are approaching it as a recreational drug or treating it like a Western medicine medical thing, and they don't understand the energetics and the relationship to the plant behind it. I think there's a lot of problems with the way that it's being done in a lot of cases. And
Carl Jung said something. He says, be wary of psychedelics and the wisdom that you didn't earn.
yes, I'm with that. When you're breaking yourself down at these levels, which is really what you're doing with that, is you're really just breaking everything down, including your ability to protect yourself, including your own energy field, including all of this stuff, right? All the things that you actually need, right? Which is why it took so long to heal. Then you're taking everything out of the way, but you're also taking away all of your protections, all of your sense of self in a lot of cases. So you lose your identity in there. There's a lot of things that go with it. And so is it a pathway there? It is, but it's really a toxic one. And we don't recommend it. So yeah. Did that answer your question, Josh?
Yeah, it ties into some of the Hyoka teachings, right? It's like, how far can you destroy yourself and bring yourself back? And like knowing that you're not going to come back. You might have a couple clicks, but there's a lot of, it just is what it is. It was the path that I signed up for. And once again, it's not recommended. It's unnecessary. Let's just put it this way. It's unnecessary, right? There are so many easier ways to do it. And really just starts with loving yourself enough not to put yourself through the.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to call myself a spiritual masochist because I would say, ow, that hurts. Do it again so I can figure out why. And that was not a healthy pathway either. My students were like, I don't like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably valid. 20 years ago. Then spiritual firefighting is going into the fire and putting the fire out. It's not running away from it, which is, it's better, but still not great, right? It's about being able to just be with what is and allow it to move through you and things like that. And the work evolves. What I teach as I grow as a person also evolves, and that's just the nature of the beast. And so that's true for anybody who's doing their work, is that their work will evolve as they evolve. And what I taught 25 years ago is different than what I teach today, right? Which is really funny. So, weird story. We're going to go off on a little tangent here. But a weird story was I had a student who was working with me at when I ran my store in Taunton, Massachusetts. And he was lovely. He lived in the neighborhood. If I couldn't make it to open the store, he had a key. He would come and open the store and hang out with us. And we just basically apprenticed him. And it was to the point where, and I get this with people who work with me for long periods. They say, yeah, I can hear in your head, I can hear your voice in my head and you know what you're going to say. And so 10 years later, we had moved on and we're still connected on Facebook and whatever. And he made a comment and he asked me a question and he's like, I don't know why I asked that question. I can hear your answer in my head. And I'm like, really? What is the answer that the voice in your head says? And he's, oh, it says this. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. The me of 10 years ago totally would have said that. The me of today is going to say this. And he was like, oh, okay. But it was like having a view back in time into my own teachings. And that's what happens, right? As we evolve over time. But coming back to the timeline discussion, one of the things that I do when I do my spiritual evolution energy review readings, which you guys have heard on Fridays on this podcast, is sometimes if I'm looking into how are things going to shift or change when you do this work or that work, and which thing should you do first in order to get the optimal results in terms of clearing the blocks that I find and things like that, is based on reading timelines. So what I'm doing is I'm testing the field and I'm adding energy in and saying, okay, give me this timeline. Let me look at this timeline. If you do this piece of work in this way, what happens? And then I look at that timeline and then I go, okay, what about this piece of work first? And I look at the timeline. I'm like, okay, if we do this and then that, what's the timeline? And so I test different energies and read the timelines at the end. And then I come up with the optimal timeline process. And that gives the order of operations for the clearing work, right? There's lots of ways to use the timeline energy to facilitate your process without having to fully jump timelines entirely, because you never know what you're going to get when you change the timeline. That's the other piece, is that you don't know that not having this injury or not having this health issue or not having this toxic relationship or this thing that happened, whatever, if you try to jump to a timeline in which that does not happen, you don't know what the cascade effect of that is going to be. And the cascade is significant. And the further back in time you go, the more significant the cascade effect is.
When we coin a new phrase here, let's call that the Forrest Gump effect.
Okay.
Life is like a box of chocolates.
You never know what you're going to get. I always yelled at him and said, read the box. Yes.
Smart.
But you can't read the box.
Oh.
It is very much about a unlabeled box of chocolates, and the chocolate flavors change. Even the expected flavors of what you might get in a box of chocolates could change depending upon the reality you opt into. And it could be significant. You could be opting into a reality in which this is true for you, but in which everything else that is important to you is not there. Or in which you live in a dystopian world, more dystopian world, or in which you live in, it could be in the positive too. We don't know. You don't know. That's the thing, is that you don't know, right? So if it's the thing about the guy fixing his leg is that it was in the moment. It was right now. So the amount of change in that 20 or 30 minutes of having broken his leg or not broken his leg was different. It was different. But the problem is that he was shifting into a reality in which he did not break his leg, but everybody else was still living in the reality in which the leg was broken because they remembered it. And so it gets complicated. Okay. If that's breaking your brain, you need to understand that is the smallest brain break there is for this entire process, right? It's just like people are like, oh, I want to astral project. No, you don't. Okay. You do not want to astral project. You want to consciousness project. Yes. But you do not want to astral project. It is unsafe. Please don't do it. Okay. The difference is taking your soul out of your body or taking your consciousness out of your body. Your soul needs to stay in your freaking body. Okay. Leave it there. It's not safe to take it out. But people think they know what they want, right? And we think that we want to timeline jump, but the cascade effect of timeline jumping is dramatic, severe. And so, therefore, you need to really choose wisely what you're doing.
I think this really does tail on to the reality creation episode and the fact that when it comes to, as we're down here learning to manipulate energy, right? So if you see a bunch of obstacles in your way of what you're trying to create, where are you learning more from being able to face those obstacles head on and learn to manipulate them, or to just say, I'm done with this lesson and move into another timeline where I've already done this lesson? Where does your soul grow more?
Another timeline in which this lesson isn't on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
You get to come
you know,
back
you
and do
can
it
choose
again.
that. If I want to be really clear, if the lesson is going to break you, choose a different reality. Okay. Choose a reality in which you don't break, because breaking oftentimes you don't come back from, right? Or it takes decades to come back from. And I've seen that happen in this work. I've seen it happen twice where people broke at a level that they left magic entirely. So twice in 25 years, I've seen people break themselves in a way that they came up against something that they literally just could not bring themselves to accept. And that broke them. And therefore they left magic behind. And so one of them is coming back now and has been for the last 5 or 6 years, but she was gone for 20 years. It takes a long time to recover from it. So if that's the case, step away from the thing that's going to break you and do something else, or pick a different timeline if you need to. But these are things that they're rare. So like I said, in 25 years, I've seen two, and I've worked with a lot of people in that time. I do not recommend timeline jumping for this reason, because of the cascade effects. However, reading the timelines and looking ahead is something that you can do. Again, how? Intuition. And how do you intend to do it? And so you just reach in and you look into the timelines and you look ahead. This is how psychics who read the future, is that they're working on the timelines. The reason I don't do future reads is because I carry the energy of transformation. And every time I open my mouth, I change the timeline. I can't help myself. And so I will start to give a read for the future, and as I'm speaking, it's changing. And as I'm speaking, it's changing. As I'm speaking, it's changing. I'm like, never mind. I give up.
Yeah, and it's tough. Like that could be the future of that moment, but based on the decisions you make moving forward. That's why I don't do a lot of future reads. I'll do like energy of the month read, like
Yeah.
this is what you have to work with. But as far as future, it's not my bag. That and love readings, those are parlor tricks for me, because I'm
Yeah.
similar. I see so many things. I'm like, oh, this is too much. This is too much, because it's a
Yeah.
world of limitless possibilities based on the decisions you make every single moment moving forward. So I'm
Well,
better at what can we look at right now that's going to help you create the reality you want. That's what I like.
and that's where I go too. And because when you're asking somebody else, oh, when will I find my soulmate? Which is the question everybody asks every psychic ever. The answer isn't a date. The answer is when you become the person your soulmate wants to be with, right? And when you are ready to receive them. And so do the work on yourself, and everything else will take care of itself. And so that's where we start at for the work that we do, right? And it's also handing over your power to somebody else, right? When is it going to happen? And then you believe them, and then you need reinforcement, and you need reassurance, and these are the people who come back week after week asking the same questions over and over again. And that's why I stopped promoting myself as a psychic when I had a store, is because I got tired of people asking me to run their lives because they wanted to hand their power over to the psychic. And I was like, this is toxic. This is not good for you. And if you're getting weekly psychic readings, you're handing over your power to the person that you're getting the reading from. If you're paying for readings more than once a month, even once a month is a lot. It is a lot. The average psychic reading is usually good for 3 to 6 months, easy. And so, start looking at how you're taking care of yourself, and how you're taking responsibility for yourself, and how you're holding your own power. And this is a lot of the work that we do in the world, is about how do you hold your own power. So we're not in that vein of hey, come and be a student forever. I'm going to be your guru. You're going to follow me for the rest of your life and blah, blah, blah. No, I want you to come in and learn how to hold your own energy and be able to be powerful on your own and be able to be solid and whatever. I'm here if you need to touch in after we're done getting you to that place, but I'm not expecting you to be part of my followers for the rest of my life. I'm certainly here and available, but you should be solid to be able to do stuff on your own after a certain period of time. And that period of time depends upon the person and how fast they do things and whatever. But the people are solid and they're like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. And when somebody hits that state, I am thrilled. I am not saying you're not good, which a lot of teachers out there will do. You got to be careful because I want people to be good. I want them to be solid. I want them to be awesome on their own. And I'm happy to be here to facilitate the next level if they're ready, or be a touchstone, or not be heard from at all. It's fine because I'm not in this to make myself feel woo guru on high, blah, blah, blah. I'm here to facilitate the transition of the planet by facilitating the transition of the people, right? So when we're going through massive transformation right now, yay. So breakdown before breakthrough, guys. This is going to be a big one, right? A massive breakdown. Anyway, so when we're talking about timelines, coming back to the thing, we're all over the place today. I think I'm just a little womp. Yep. Coming back to timelines, the short answer is the timelines are going to expand and collapse as they will. And you can choose to try and create your own reality using a shift in timeline, but you're going to get what you're going to get. And the sooner you make that shift, the less likely that the shift will cause catastrophic changes. If it's just an immediate thing that happened that you want to choose a different reality, okay, that's going to be less likely. But if you want to go back in time and choose a different reality from your childhood, I do not recommend that. Like in big, bold letters, do not recommend. Negative 100 out of 10. It's a really bad idea because it will create catastrophic changes in your life, and you may be so disoriented by the shift that you are not able to adjust. So just, sovereign being, choose as you will, but I do not
Been doing a lot of work around that personally. As we know, like the work comes in layers. And one of the things I realized doing some of this deep inner child work as I've been sitting with my inner child more and more, it's more about speaking with him about how much the path ahead shapes who we become and loving who we are in that moment and this moment, and realizing there was a realization. And it's so funny that this is where this conversation led to, because there was this thought while I was in there. I was like, I could just shift this and make this so much easier for him. And I was like, but then I wouldn't be where I am at right now. And I was like, so it's more about giving that inner child the comfort and the love and validating its emotions of what it's going through, rather than shifting it to something that is more safe, more comforting than what was.
Right.
Because if what was didn't happen, what is would not be the reality of the moment.
Yes. Yeah, there's a friend of mine Derek Loudermilk did a visioning that I attended, which was he took us forward in time 11 years and said, okay, see where you are, see what you're doing, see what's going on for you. And I had this beautiful vision of me in the house that I would love to live in. And I had a bunch of yurts in my yard that were like glamping yurts. And they had air conditioning and heat and whatever. They were lovely. And there were random people wandering into the house and out of the house to the yurts and whatever. And here I was, and I was living there and on this piece of land in Panama. And I looked at myself and I was like, okay, so what is this and how does it work? And I just went, people just show up. My future self went, people just show up. And I'm like, yeah, but how? Because I was looking for the business plan, right? and the future me just went, they just come. And I was given nothing. I was like, the future me was like, nope, you don't get this shortcut. You need to learn the lessons as you go. They're important for you to understand. And so future me was being totally enigmatic. And I was like, what the fuck?
It
Like
lines
a
up
year
with
and a half
everything.
ago. Yeah, it was a year.
Lines up to where things are headed towards anyway, if you look
Well,
at it.
and this was a year and a half ago, and now I'm here, and I'm leaning into doing more retreats, and I'm also looking at putting together personal retreats where people can come out, and they don't have to be part of a group, but if people show up at the same time, putting them together because they're meant to be together because they arrived at the same time, and doing the work that way and things like that. And so I'm literally just ideating exactly how that's going to work, but waiting for the inspiration. But that sort of thing is exactly would create the reality that I saw. And I wasn't trying to create it. It just showed up along the way as I was following the path that the universe took me on. And so all of this stuff is what's coming to fruition. And then me wanting to get out from behind the computer and being able to be more in person with people, which I love. And it's where my true gifts lie, is in there. Can I do things at a distance? Absolutely. But I am happier. They are happier. Everyone's happier when we're in physical reality, right? Physical presence with each other. And it's more intensive. It's better. You're steeping in my energy field. So there's an up level that happens for you in that process, because we're sharing energies and we're moving things, shifting things, and we talked about being outside of your physical reality and your identities and your roles and things. So there's a lot of benefits to being in person. But that was a timeline thing. I was looking ahead on the timeline and getting a vision of that. And that vision has been informing everything for me as I've been holding the intention for that reality. Even though I wasn't actively looking for it, I've been holding that reality. And I've been saying, okay, this is what's coming. I'm committed to it. I don't know how, because that's not my job. That's the universe's job. I don't know how, but I am committed to this reality that I saw because I loved the energy of it. And I loved how it was working. And I'm like, okay, let's see what comes and how that plays out, because the universe is going to direct me. And that's what's been happening. All of these things this is a timeline piece, and it's also part of creating your reality that we did in the last episode. So in case you'd missed it, there's a lot to creating your own reality and manifesting through the timelines. And this is a process that you work your way through, and you unfetter yourself from, because this is one of the biggest challenges with energetics, is that we believe that physics controls energetics. And that's part of the CERN thing that I was talking about, is they're like, oh, physics changed energetics. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Energetics create physics. It's the other way around. Okay. So it's not the way it works. And so when you can let go of physical reality, when you're operating in the energetic, then things are much easier, right? You can move things and shift things and whatever, when you can let go of the belief that physical reality is a set entity. There's actually stuff coming out in physics right now, in quantum physics, that is proving that reality is created by your own mind. So I'm like, yeah, tell us something we didn't know, right? Like, glad to see you guys catching up.
Reality already knows what science is trying to prove, but we all have our part in it, right? It all helps in the long term. We all have our role to play in the divine show.
Yeah. Okay. And with that, I'm going to declare this episode complete. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. And remember that what you focus on is what expands. What you intend is what you create. So choose wisely.